Good morning, students. Let us continue with the chapter number 13, Organisms and Population. Next topic, Population Interaction. Can you think of any natural habitat on the earth that is inhabited just by a single species? No, there is no such habitat, and such a situation is even inconceivable. For any species, the minimal requirement is one or more species for which it can feed. Even a plant species which makes its own food cannot survive alone. It needs soil microbes to break down the organic compounds in the soil and return the inorganic nutrients for absorption. And then, how will the plant manage pollination without an animal agent? It is obvious that in nature, animal, plant, microbe do not and cannot live in isolation, but interact in various ways to form a biological community. Even in minimal communities, many interactive linkage exist, although all may not be readily apparent. Interspecific interaction arises from the interaction of population of two different species. They could be beneficial, detrimental, or neutral, neither harm nor benefit to one of the species or both. Assigning positive sign for beneficial interaction, negative for detrimental, and 0 for neutral interaction. Let us look all the possible outcomes. Both are beneficial to each other. It is mutualism. Both harm each other. It is competition. One is benefited and other is harmed. It is predation or it is parasitism. One is benefited, second is neither benefited nor harmed. It is commensalism. And one is harmed but other is neither benefited nor harmed is amensalism. So these are the possible population interactions. Both the species benefit in mutualism and both lose in competition in their interaction with each other. In both parasitism and predation, only one species is benefited, parasite and predator respectively, and the interaction is detrimental to the other species, host and prey respectively. The interaction where one species is benefited and other is neither benefited nor harmed, then it is commensalism. In amensalism, on the other hand, one species is harmed, whereas the other is unaffected. So predation, parasitism and commensalism share a common characteristic. The interacting species live closely together. First is predation. What would happen to all the energy fixed by autotrophic organism in the community that has no animal to eat plants? You can think of predation as nature's way of transferring to higher trophic levels the energy fixed by plants. When we think of predator and prey, most probably it is the tiger and deer that readily come to our mind. But a sparrow eating any seed is no less a predator. Although animals eating plants are categorized separately as herbivores, they are, in a broad ecological context, not very different from predators. Besides, acting as conduits for energy transfer across trophic levels, predators play other important role. They keep prey population under control. But for predators, prey species could achieve very high population density and cause ecosystem instability. When certain exotic species are introduced into an geographical area, they become invasive and start spreading fast because the invaded land does not adopted in agriculture pest control are based on the ability of the predator to regulate prey population. Predators also help in maintaining species diversity in a community by reducing the intensity of competition among competing prey species. In the rocky intertidal communities of the American Pacific coast, the starfish pisaster is an important predator. In the field experiment, when all the starfish were removed from the enclosed intertidal area, more than 10 species of invertebrates become extinct within a year because of interspecific competition. If a predator is too efficient and overexploits its prey, then the prey might become extinct, and following it, the predator will also become extinct for lack of food. This is the reason why predators in nature are prudent. Prey species have evolved various defenses to lessen the impact of predation. Some species of insects and frog are cryptically colored, that is camouflage, to avoid being detected easily by the predators. Some are poisonous and hence are avoided by the predators. The monarch butterfly is highly distasteful to its predator bird because of special chemical present in its body. Interestingly, the butterfly acquires this chemical during its caterpillar stage by feeding on a poisonous weed. For plants, herbivores are predators. Nearly 25% of all insects are known to be phytophagous, that is, they feed on the plants and other parts of the plants. The problem is particularly severe for plants because, unlike animals, they cannot run away from their predators. Plants therefore have evolved an astonishing variety of morphological and chemical defenses against herbivores. Thorns, acacia cactus are most common morphological means of defense. Many plants produce and store chemicals that make the herbivore sick when they are eaten, inhibit feeding or digestion, disrupt its reproduction, or even kill it. You must have seen weed calotropis growing in abundant field. The plant produces highly poisonous cardiac glycosides, and that is why when you never see any cattle or goat browsing on this plant, a wide variety of chemical substances that we extract from plants on a commercial scale, nicotine, caffeine, quinine, strychnine, opium, etc., are produced by them actually as a defense against grazers and browsers. Is competition. When Darwin spoke the struggle for existence and survival of the fittest in the nature, he was convinced that interspecific competition is a potent force in organic evolution. It is generally believed that competition occurs when closely related species compete for the same resources that are limiting, but this is not entirely true. Firstly, totally unrelated species could also compete for the same resource. For instance, in some shallow South American lake, visiting flamingos and resident fishes compete for their common food, the zooplanktons in the lake. Secondly, resources need not be limiting for competition to occur. In interference competition, the feeding efficiency of one species might be reduced due to interfering and inhibitory presence of the other species, even if resources are abundant. Therefore, competition is best defined as a process in which the fitness of one species is significantly lower in the presence of another species, or the intrinsic rate of increase. It is relatively easy to demonstrate in laboratory experiment, as Gauss and other experimental ecologists did. When resources are limited, the competitively superior species will eventually eliminate the other species, but evidence for such competitive exclusion occurring in nature is not always conclusive. Strong and persuasive circumstantial evidence does exist, however, in some cases. The Abingdon tortoise in Galapagos Island became extinct when within a decade after goats were introduced in the island, apparently due to the greater browsing efficiency of the goats. Another evidence for the occurrence of competition in nature comes from what is called competitive release, a species whose distribution is restricted to a small geographical area because of the presence of a competitive superior species is found to expand its distributional range dramatically when the competing species is experimentally removed. Connell's elegant field experiments showed that on the rocky sea coast of Scotland, the larger and competitively superior Barnacle balanus dominates the intertidal area. It is a fish and excludes the smaller barnacle Cathamalus from that zone. In general, herbivores and plants appear to be more adversely affected by competition than the carnivores. Gauss' competitive exclusion principle states that two closely related species competing for the same resource cannot coexist indefinitely, and the competitively inferior one will be eliminated eventually. This may be true if resources are limiting, but not otherwise. More recent studies do not support such gross generalizations about competition, while they do not rule out the occurrence of interspecific competition in nature. They point out that species facing competition might evolve mechanisms that promote coexistence rather than exclusion. One such mechanism is resource partitioning. If two species compete for the same resource, they would avoid competition by choosing, for instance, different times for feeding or different foraging patterns. MacArthur showed that five closely related species of warblers living on the same tree were able to avoid competition and coexist due to behavioral differences in their foraging activities. Very true. By the behavioral differences or by changing the grazing times, feeding times, they can avoid the competition also. And if they are able to avoid, exclusion is not required.